subconsciously, I'm missing someone or missing a certain feeling. So Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries of deaths, what have you, even though I push it to the back of my mind and I try and create this little box that I put all little grief in and I lock it up and I try and squeeze it to the back of my head, it will always come forward because the wave is going to force its way through, regardless of how many barriers and barricades you put up to try and stop it.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So the festive season, it's well and truly here, and I'm not really feeling it. So last Christmas was just a few months after our daughter had died, and it was a few weeks before what would have been her due date. And, you know, last year was really terrible. This year, I'm still feeling pretty blah, and that is okay. Because just like how our grief is very personal and very complicated, how we feel about these big festive moments can also be complicated. And my guest today crucially brings some much needed real talk to this topic. Lou Nylander is a marketing strategist and community builder who's passionate about democratizing marketing expertise and fostering inclusive cultures. She's the founder of Wildflowers of London, a welcoming, empowering, and beautifully connected community for professional women, which I'm so grateful to be a part of. And Lou is also a board member for Pancreatic Cancer Action, a subject that's so close to her heart after her dad died. And if you're going into this festive season grieving, I really, really hope that our conversation will empower you to rip up the rulebook on Christmas and just do you. And for all of us to take inspiration from Lou's openness to talk about the difficult, because it's here where we can meet others and support them through their hurt. So welcome to Death on the Daily, Lou.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Tanya. I'm really excited.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited that you're here. And today we're getting a little bit festive, but perhaps in a different way to the way that we typically think about the festive period. And this is because the festive period can be really, really difficult for those who are grieving. So, Lou, I know that you've had a lot of experience in this space. And so I would love to just give you space to speak to you, your story in grief, and, you know, linking that obviously with those who you love.
Yeah, sure. And thanks so much for having me. And also thanks so much for creating this podcast and this space for people. I think one of the things that I found over the last 10 years is that people don't speak enough about grief. It's a bit of a taboo, you know. People are very nice to you when someone first dies and you send flowers and they go to the funeral, and then actually after that nobody wants to utter another word. And unfortunately grief doesn't work like that. So I think having spaces where people are able to share their stories is really important. So going on to my story, I think my first experience with grief was pretty harrowing, really. My mum died 3 months before my 30th birthday. It was very unexpected. She wasn't ill. She didn't have a long-term illness or anything like that. She actually ended up, she had a bit of a cough. And it wasn't going away. Fast forward, my little sister had gone to work or gone to a work party or something and come home, and she'd found mum that had passed out and was sort of like a bit lethargic on the in the living room on the floor. And so she decided to take her to the hospital, and she called me, but it all just seemed like, oh, she had a bit of a cough. It wasn't too bad. Anyway, long story short, I ended up going down to the hospital, and then mum was taken into hospital that evening. And she never left
Oh.
hospital, and she died 3 weeks later, having she got pneumonia, and
Hmm.
she got put on a ventilator. And so when she died, she wasn't conscious. It wasn't like, she could say goodbye, or she knew she was dying, or anything like that. So that in itself, even the way that she died, one was so quick and so shocking, but also just I wasn't prepared. I'd never been to a funeral before my mum's funeral.
Wow.
I'd never, and I'd never had to. It sounds bizarre, but my grandparents had died before I was born, so I didn't necessarily have that, older grandparent stuff. And then there were obviously funerals of like older people that happened, but it was mainly I was either too small or I was at uni, so I just never happened to go to a funeral. I don't think it was a conscious decision on anyone's part, myself included, not to ever go to a funeral before your mum died. I just, in a way, it was just a bit of it was not luck, but it just happened, is the way the cookie crumbled, if you know what I mean. And then I was plunged into this situation where my mum was incredibly popular. So every day there were people at the house, and in the black community and other communities, like when somebody's grieving, the idea is to, like, everyone goes around them and brings food and all that kind of stuff. But it was also incredibly overwhelming. Like, your mum's just died, you weren't expecting it, and then there's people in your house every day, and like there's never a spare moment to be alone. And yeah, it was a really sort of challenging time for me. And yeah, and then that was, I suppose, the beginning of what I now sort of come to pass with my counsellor, of this sort of 10-15 year period, which has been of my the last sort of 10-15 years of my life, of which has been cloaked in a lot of grief. So yeah, as I said, my mum died 3 months before my 30th birthday. That sent my dad into a bit of a tailspin. Both my sisters live abroad, so I became sort of like my dad's closest family member, and tend to spend a lot of time with him. But the grief that my dad felt from my mum dying had a profound effect on his mental health, which meant that my dad was also a bit of a complex character anyway. Like, so prior to my mum dying, he was also very complex. It wasn't, you know, we had a very interesting relationship. Like, I was much closer to my mum when she was alive, so I found my dad a bit tricky. But we found a way, because I had to look after him, and I could sense a massive, profound loss in him. And he was very, very affected by my mum dying. I think he hadn't realised, like, just how much she did. And then there was just this massive gaping hole. And I think he really, really suffered. And then I think a couple of months after my mum passed away, his best friend died, which was awful.
Mm.
And there was, his best friend lived in Sierra Leone, where we're from originally. And they did a memorial service in London. And my dad did a speech about his best friend. And then my dad cried, and I was shocked. He said, last year my mum died, this year my best friend died. And then he just started to cry. And I was like, tears started to fall in my eyes, because I was like, I'd never seen my dad cry before. Not like that. Like, not like his voice cracked and he cried. Um, but it was, in a weird way, even though, like, that it was difficult to see somebody unravel like that. I think it brought us closer. It's like there was a sort of understanding between me and my dad after my mum died that didn't sort of exist before that, if that makes sense. There was some type of cutting through all of the ups and downs of our relationships, and just kind of getting very close to just, this is life, this is it. So let's not let all this random BS, if I'm going to be honest, get in the way of that. And let's just try and forge forward and make things work. So in the end, I think, even though it's really hard, I wouldn't have had it any other way, because I don't think without the way, well, I mean, the way things are and the way things happened were the way things happened. So I can't really get past that. But I don't think I would have ended up knowing my dad in the same way if my mum hadn't have passed, because I wouldn't have got to see that side of him, because I would have automatically just gravitated to my mum more because we had a better relationship. Do you see what I mean? And there's stuff that I now know about my dad that I just we wouldn't have had those conversations, because we wouldn't have been left alone together. And he was very sick during the pandemic, which meant we spent a lot of time together. So I left where I live in South London and went back to Essex, where I grew up, and we kind of bubbled together and stuff like that. I mean, there were times where we fought like cat and dog, because that man like used to drive me insane. But then there was also times where like I was doing my choir remotely and he would be like dancing and like in the background and stuff like that. And he was like, "You're so funny singing through a computer." And then other funny things where he would go to me, "What is your job? All you do, all I hear you doing is talking on the phone every day. 1 minute you are talking to Australia. Next minute you are talking to Israelis. Next minute you are talking to Americans. What are you doing?" And also the fact that he just give, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I'm going to. Like, he gave zero fucks. Like, I would be in the middle of like a phone call with like the CEO of whatever company, and my dad and I'd normally work in the kitchen, which was downstairs, like a kitchen diner. If my dad needed something to eat, he would just come in and I'd be like, "No, Dad, like, I'm on a call." And he'd be like, "No, my kitchen." And he would just walk in, do what the fuck he wanted. And then I would be like sitting there trying to like change the angle. And then after a while, I just thought, fuck it. Like, it's his kitchen. He needs to go and make a cup of tea and I'm on a call. Like, people would just have to see my dad in the background making a cup of tea. Like, it's not the worst thing. We're in a pandemic where people are dying. Lou's dad making a cup of tea on a conference call is not the, you know. And in the end, like, my team members got to know him a bit, and then sometimes I'd be like, "Hi, Dr. Nylander, hi," and he would be like, "Hello, hello," while he just like make his tea. So yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like for the last, so my mum died. Oh gosh. So I'm 40 now. So she would have died in 2014. Yeah, 2014. And then my dad died in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's been a long time. And the problem is grief isn't like, I don't know, there's some people, I know they mean well, Tanya, like they super mean well, but they genuinely think like, just you put your parent or your grandparent or your whoever in the ground or you cremate them and suddenly you're just going to be fine. Yes, the funeral's happened. Hallelujah, I'm absolved of all my sins. I'm never going to grieve again. I'm going to be partying again. You're like, no, babe, it doesn't work like that. I think for me, grief comes in waves, really strong waves. I think that's the only sort of analogy that I think for me really explains it. And sometimes the tide is out, sometimes the tide comes in, and sometimes there's massive waves that crash onto the rocks. And lots of the times they coincide with, I suppose, key moments or anniversaries or memories or stuff like that, because I think subconsciously I'm missing someone or missing a certain feeling. So Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries of deaths, what have you, even though I push it to the back of my mind and I try and create this little box that I put all little grief in and I lock it up and I try and squeeze it to the back of my head, it will always come forward. because the wave is going to force its way through, regardless of how many barriers and barricades you put up to try and stop it. So that's why I think now, sort of 10 plus years into this sort of grief journey, I suppose, that I'm on, now I let it crash. Now I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's coming. You can try and force it back, but it will come anyway. So let it come. Let's try and deal with what it is, or what is upsetting you, or why are you feeling this way, and try and focus and figure out that more than focusing on keeping it at bay. Because I think for a long time, that was my modus operandi. A long time, it was just keep shit together, keep smiling, keep being pleasant, keep telling everybody you're okay, even yourself, because that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear that you don't sleep very well and haven't slept very well since your mum died. They don't want to hear that, like, you know, hearing a song in a shopping centre can send you into like having a mini meltdown, like a tantrum. They don't want to hear those things. So yeah, I think like seasonal times, birthdays, all of those kind of things have been a challenge for me. Because birthdays were big in our house. When it's your birthday, you felt like the king or the queen. It was one time we didn't, not that we were poor growing up or anything like that, but my parents were like, you know, they were, they'd come over from Sierra Leone, like they built themselves up and built up things. So, you know, it wasn't like we had loads and loads of treats all the time or things like that. So when it was your birthday or Christmas, that was when it was like, genuinely, it was like, as a kid, you were like everything was on play at Christmas. Like, you would ask for something and you would get it.
Oh,
if it was your birthday, like, you would come downstairs and there would just be so many. My mum would wrap all these presents and you'd be like, it's my birthday. And yeah, and you would get cake and everyone would sing, and it was really like birthdays. So they were great growing up, birthdays and Christmas. So when that's all gone, then, you know, and my mum was very big on Christmas. It was her thing, really. She liked it. So yeah, the first Christmas where she wasn't around was pretty tough. And I think subsequently now, I find every Christmas quite tough, because it will just never be the same again, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Oh, Lou, thank you so much for sharing so openly. And what has really resonated as well is how you shared, you know, in all areas of the complexities that can come in the relationships with those who we love, who have passed, and obviously those who are still living too. But also, you know, in that, you know, the joyful memories, and obviously at certain times of year, how, you know, with their death comes the death of obviously Christmases and birthdays as they were. And I wonder as well, you know, to that point around, you know, us at this time of year, I think there's such a pressure for it to be joyful. You know, you look outside everywhere, it's all the twinkly lights, it's, you know, good tidings and joyful times, and let's all party and be happy. But actually, the reality for those of us who are grieving and who have lost those who we love is very, very different. So I'd love to find out if there's any sort of, I suppose, specific moments of tradition that feel really hard, or any, you know, challenges that you've faced in any of these Christmases.
Yeah, I think like Christmas is tough. Christmas is a tough one. In particular, of all the holidays, I find Christmas pretty tricky. So all I can say is it doesn't have to be the same as it once was. And kind of accepting that helps to take pain and pressure off it. So I think the worst thing for me, or the worst type of way of celebrating Christmas, would have been if we had just all went back to my parents' house where we grew up and tried to replicate it. That would have been worse. So we started spending a lot of Christmas in the States with both of my sisters live in the States, but at this time, just my older sister lived in the States. So we would all go and spend Christmas with her at her house, and we would go there. So me, my dad, and my little sister, and then she has a husband, but he doesn't have much family, so he would come as well. And then basically any friends or families, friends of hers that didn't necessarily have family or couldn't get back to their family would come. So we then created what we started calling the Ulcerans Christmas, which was basically like us. We would fly over, and then any of her single or anyone that wanted to join, and it did for whatever reason. And we would obviously bring our traditions from the UK, and then they would also have their own random traditions. So, for instance, one of the traditions in the Nylander household is that we do scratch cards. So my mum used to buy shitloads of scratch cards, and then everybody in their Christmas cards gets like a pile of scratch cards like this big.
Wow.
And then on Christmas morning, I know, totally like African gambling mother. And then everyone gets a stash of scratch cards, and then like on Christmas morning you all like open your cards and like try and see if you can win. And I sometimes used to make like get some money, so you used to get like 20-30 quid, you know, like
awesome,
not loads, but stuff like that. So then we would bring that tradition, and we would everyone was there would get some scratch cards. And then I've done it, like if I've stayed at London at some friends' houses or something like that, I've brought scratch cards, and they're like, this is great. And I'm like, Nylander tradition, this is what we do on Christmas Day, gamble. And then for instance, my sister's husband, he like just loves ribs. I don't know if this is a family tradition or he just made it up because he wanted it, but he loves ribs. So he gets the barbecue out. He marinates meat overnight and he barbecues the ribs on Christmas morning, like slow cooks them. We never used to have ribs for the Christmas dinner. It's not a very British thing to do, but who cares? Bring it. Bring your tradition. Bring whatever you want to bring. So what I would say to someone, I mean, I don't know if it's advice or whatever I can't really, I can't advise people. It is what it is. How you feel is how you feel. Like, you have got to acknowledge that and what have you. But I suppose from my perspective, I think do something fucking different. Rip up the rule book. Do something you've always wanted to do in Christmas. Help your brain to reimagine a new Christmas so that your neural pathways don't just go back on a loop to what it used to be. Break that and do something different. And then I know it sounds weird, but it won't be so bad. So that's the only advice I can give people, is to really, like, for want of being crass and crude, fuck shit up, like, because that sort of breaking that pattern in your head and your mind will allow you to potentially enjoy yourself. Maybe you won't enjoy yourself like you enjoyed it before, but it will be different. And that difference, I think, is what your brain needs, is that change. Because when you try and replicate something, that's when it's bad, because it's never going to be the same. So then it's really bad and it feels bad because all you notice is what's not good. Do you know what I mean? What's not the same. Whereas if you're doing something totally different, there's no way your brain can start taking you there, because it's like, mate, we're eating ribs. There's nothing like Christmassy about that, and that is okay. This is the new Christmas. So that would be my advice.
Oh, I love that. Ripping up the rule book on Christmas. Do it your way. And I think, that's so powerful. And I think particularly with that acknowledgement as well, it's going to feel different, and that's okay. And I think that's such a beautiful way, for me, what I find really powerful is, when we go through a loss, to be able to understand that actually the world doesn't look the same. Our experiences aren't the same. There's almost like it's a rebirth, isn't it? We sort of are.
It's before and after.
And after.
Definitely.
Exactly that. And, and with that as well, there will be, secondary losses in any grief. There's all the secondary losses. And I think to acknowledge that actually birthdays and Christmases are times where you will feel that secondary loss, but also to be able to start making those new memories. And as you shared, rewiring those neural pathways as well through just saying, do you know what? It doesn't have to be the same. This can be that new beginning. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because it's not going to be the same. And I think that's if you can get your head around, it's not going to be the same, and that's okay. You can manage it. I mean, but I'm telling you now, baby, it took me 10 years to get there.
Yeah.
So it's also like, for anybody that's got a grief that's really fresh, this is such a like cliche. And like when people used to say it to me, I used to be like, like, oh, such a cliche, but I'm going to say it. Things do get better with time, not as in just because time has passed, things get better, but because you are better able to cope. You are better able to process your feelings. You are better able to regulate. You are better able to understand why your brain is doing that, why your body is giving you these reactions, why you're having visceral reactions. You're actually probably able to verbalize loss. Like I can now say very quickly to somebody, they ask me about my parents or whatever, I'll say, oh, my parents passed away, blah, 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 or my dad died of this, blah, blah, blah. There was a time where somebody would ask me a question about my mum or my dad, and I would either pretend they were still alive, I would answer it like in the present, or I would freak the hell out because I didn't want to have that reaction that people have, like as soon as you tell them something bad and they flip out and they don't know what to say, and then you're uncomfortable and they're uncomfortable and everyone's uncomfortable, and then the conversation kind of stilts, and it's just like, oh, but all I was doing was telling my truth, and now I'm told my truth, and now everybody is awkward. Whereas now I don't give a shit because I'm very calm, and I just say very calmly, yeah, no, my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and my mum died when I was younger. So I normally hang out with my sisters or rah rah. I just finished the sentence, so it's like, it's not my mum died, full stop. It's my mum died, so I spend Christmas with XYZ. Or did you see what I mean? And I'm able to do that now. I wasn't able to do that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, every time someone would ask me a question, it was like they were stabbing me in the chest, you know? It was like a fresh wound, or I had a wound and they were going, that's how it felt. And it was just a question to them. But to me, it was so much more. But now I'm able to understand that it's not that it's not about them, but I used to make myself uncomfortable to make other people comfortable. Now, people die. The one thing we know when we're born is that we're going to die. We don't know anything else, but we know that because we don't live forever. So people die. So I know, like, people don't like to hear it. I'm going to die, babe. You're going to die. We're all going to die. My cat's going to die. People going to die. And things die. Nothing lasts forever. And I think, you know, the more we have these conversations, so I love that you've done this, because people need to just talk about shit. Like, talk about death, talk about periods, talk about sex. Like, these things that are becoming so taboo, which are actually intrinsically linked to humanity.
Yes.
And nobody wants to talk about them. But it's what we are. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? When you really, really think about it. If we didn't have periods, if we didn't have sex, if we didn't die, like, these are all things that are so linked. But people don't really talk about. They're all taboo. How are they taboo when that is life? You know?
Yeah. It's all of the things that have been pushed into the shadows, to your point, Lou, are just inherently human. It's just being human, or being a living being on this planet. And I just wanted to as well just sort of circle back to where you were sharing around the fact that actually the first Christmas isn't taking you 10 years to get to this point. But actually, I think that's a really powerful acknowledgement as well for anyone who is, you know, has a fresh loss and is grieving, you know, as we go into this festive period, that actually it's also okay if it really, really hurts, if you feel really numb, if it's a terrible Christmas, because, that was me last year after we lost our daughter, and it was my due date was in beginning of January. So it was at that kind of critical period where I was sort of thinking what could have been. And I just remember, just going through Christmas, just being really I just felt just grey, very depressed, and that's okay. It's totally okay.
I think it's totally okay. And I'm going to be honest, I can't really now. I remember the tradition of what I was talking about. I think it's a coping mechanism of the brain, isn't it? So you block out trauma, you can't really remember a lot of things. So now there's lots of things I'm quite hazy about when it comes to my mum. I've got more fresh memories of my dad around the time my dad passing, because it was quicker, but it's definitely like a time which there's some stuff that feels so raw, and I can tell you, I can explain it to you exactly like it happened. And then there's other sort of things that kind of fade and are less so clear in my memory. So what I would say is that if you just need to get through something, find a way to get through it. Whatever your coping mechanisms are, if you need to go and sleep in the day, if you need to go and take yourself for a walk, if you need to just do not be with family, and you and your partner, or you and a friend, you want to just do something slightly different, and make it really small and make it so that you can cope during the festive season, do that. But you have to listen to yourself and know what you want. The only thing I would say though is about isolation, because yes, sometimes make things small, but sometimes don't isolate yourself. More and more, I think human beings, as much as people say they're introvert, they're extrovert, they're this, they're that, we need other people around us. We do. Like, even if you're having the worst day, like if I see my cousin or one of my godchildren, or they say something to me really, really funny, it doesn't matter like how deep in a little fog I am or how depressed, I will laugh. One of my godsons is so funny. Like, he doesn't matter what is wrong with me or like what have you. If he says something funny, I can't help but laugh. Like, I genuinely will crack up. So, you can, just because you're grieving doesn't mean you never see the joy in life anymore. Sometimes it's hard to see it at the time, but the joy will come back. It will come back.
Yeah, I love that. And there, I think that's so powerful as well. When you're talking about your godson, and that there are, also it can be really powerful. I was reading Lucy Hone's book on resilient grieving, and she talks about sort of going and seeking out, those glimmers of joy. It's about finding them. And that's my experience in grief. To your point, there's just those curious moments where your heart is absolutely broken, but something just makes you roll around on the floor laughing, or something just makes you feel like that full force of love in a moment, or purpose or meaning or something.
Oh,
So
something really simple, like something's really cute. Like,
yes.
I remember I was like in the real funk, and I was walking, and it must have been around the summer, because otherwise it wouldn't exist. And I just saw the most beautiful butterfly, and the butterfly and as I kept walking, as I kept going, the butterfly kept coming back and coming in my path, and I seen this beautiful butterfly and blah blah. And I just got to be like, that butterfly is beautiful, because it was just so beautiful, and like, I could still see how beautiful it was, and it was quite a bit. I mean, it depends how like in tune with the universe and stuff like that you are, but some people would say, well, like maybe I needed to see that butterfly that day, and like maybe that's why it came into my path. But I couldn't get over like the colorings, the markings, or what have you, and I just had not. I was in Bromley, babe. I really wasn't expecting to see such a pretty little butterfly, but and that's the joy of life. I think there's very small things that can make you smile, and I think it's about remembering that, like, it doesn't also have to be all these grandiose massive thing. Like, Christmas for me isn't, as I know I talked about when I was little, all the presents and all that stuff, but it's more the feeling, and that family feeling, and that tradition, and that thing that I miss. But you can still recreate little glimmers. I think glimmers is a great word of joy. One, by paying homage to that tradition, i.e., like doing the scratch cards or something like that, but also by doing stuff new and seeing new things, which also may spark joy as well.
I love that. I actually today I'm paying homage to my granddad who died 2 years ago because I'm wearing it's just you probably can't see
His
his
jumper.
jumper, which is the one actually that he wore in his final week when I was I don't think for every day that week, but for his final
Yeah,
few
he
days
wore it around those
when I
times.
was
Yeah,
in his care home and he's on his sort of the morphine and everything.
yeah, yeah.
But it always made me think because the care home used to have him in it sort of year around. I think it was clearly the team there loved this jumper because every time I turned up he was always wearing it.
This jumper.
Always this jumper. But I love it because it's Christmas. It feels really Christmassy. And it's got little, I don't know if you can see snowflake on the arm and
Yeah,
stuff. So
I can see.
I wear it every Christmas. It's sort of saved for this time of year. And to that point, I just think of Granddad. I put it on and I'm like, oh yeah, Granddad's here.
There's something symbolic in stuff. So I wear this ring. I don't know if you can see it. So this was my mum's ring. And I wear it every day. And it's like, so I always sort of have her around with me. And I get so many compliments on the ring and stuff like that. And I always go, oh, it's my mum's ring. My mum's passed away, but it's my ring. And like, it's so nice actually, because that gives me glimmers all the way. And I have a few things that I kept from my mum's wardrobe, and every now and again I'll bust out like my mum had some. My mum loved to shop, I'll tell you that. So she got some amazing bags, amazing jewelry, and it's so funny. Every time I wear something that was my mum's thing, the amount of compliments I've got. I mean, she had very good taste, obviously, but the amount of compliments I get, and actually they become glimmers because it then gives me a chance. It gives me a space to go, oh, that was my mum's and she passed away, but this is what she had, and it lets it out a bit. So I think like wearing people's shit is good. I think it's got, well, for me, it has been anyway. It's been something that has helped me to verbalize something sometimes, and pay homage to someone, I suppose, as well in that way.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I really feel it gives me that anchoring. Even this is my necklace that I bought actually last Christmas. Oh, this is the wrong way around. For my daughter, it's a little lioness and her cub, which is me and her. But even that, I think these things, whether it is someone who obviously is like a parent or, someone who has, I guess, made it earthside, or, I suppose I'd just say for anyone who's been through pregnancy loss and similar equally, you can buy your own little memento and treat yourself with that gift that will always you'll remember them.
I think that's so important. A good friend of mine lost her baby at 5 months.
Oh, same as me.
Yeah, it was really, I'm really sorry about that. It was really,
thank you,
really,
Lou.
really tough. And to see the effect that it had, it's my godson's mother actually.
Oh.
So the effect that it had on my friend and then her partner and then my godson as well, because he's 8. So he understood a baby was coming and then it wasn't. And then he was like saying stuff like, well, why did our baby die and their baby didn't die?
Wow.
And it's like, how do you explain to an 8-year-old that? Because that's learning that life isn't fair very, very, very early, isn't it? Like, what do you say? And then just seeing my friend, she was totally broken, like absolutely broken. And like the blame that she put on herself and started to think, what did I do? And all this kind of stuff was quite, but she's actually with child at the moment. She's having another baby and things seem to be going quite well, but that also gave me an insight into something that a type of grief, a different type of grief that I'm good with. Not I'm good with grief, but obviously I've gone through a lot of grief. So, but this was something different, and I couldn't actually understand. Normally, if it's somebody's grandparent dying or what have you, I've never been pregnant. I've not had a child, so I was empathetic, but I also understood that this is a type of grief that I can't really fully understand, because I think there's it's both emotional and physical. There's a physical body grief, and then there's obviously the fallout of a baby loss is quite horrendous on the person that has to carry, and then obviously the emotional for all parties involved. So I think that's also another area. Like she got supported by Oh, it's a charity. I've forgotten the name now. But yeah, I'll ask her. But yeah, anyway, long story short, like they were so helpful to
Hmm.
her, and I think there are organizations and charities that are basically doing work that the state should do,
Hmm.
like that should be offered to people. Like if people pass away, I think,
Yeah.
there should be grief counselling. There should be that you should be able to access on the NHS, etc., etc. I think for baby loss, I don't. I think it's a bit of a postcode lottery, or it depends where you are in the country to what support you get. But
Hmm.
these charities are basically doing like some of the work that I genuinely think the state should be providing for people. But
Yeah.
I'm so glad that there are these charities out there to support people, because I think they need it. I
Yeah.
know that I sought a lot of help when my dad was ill from various charities, and their help was invaluable. So I'd also say that. Also going back to like Christmas and stuff like that, there are places that you can go um, to speak to people as well. Like, and it doesn't have to always be your family. Sometimes actually it's easier to talk to somebody that's not. Everyone else has got their own shit as well, and their own views and their own relationships with the bereaved and stuff like that. And sometimes they don't marry, which is cool, because everyone's different. But then maybe somebody objective sometimes could also help.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, some of the charities that have helped me. So I called Cruise for their bereavement sort of counselling
Yeah,
line just
yeah.
to speak to someone, where it was like, to your point, everyone sort of disappears. Or there's like the Roadrunner effect where they
Yeah.
literally disappear as soon as you like, bye.
They're gone. Bye.
Yeah,
Bye,
exactly.
Felicia.
Exactly. So Cruise were brilliant there. And then the other charities are Petals, who really supported me.
Oh,
They do a lot. Is that the
petals.
one? Yeah,
Yes,
Petals.
petals, I
And then I
believe
have
it
to
was.
give a shout out to Sister Circle as well, who are very much them. They're very London based, but for anyone who's in London, or I'm in Essex, just sort of outside of London, and they supported me through peer support stuff, which was where we used to go for walks together with
Oh,
other
that's
women who've been
nice.
through the same thing. So
That's
to
quite
your
nice.
point, Lou, there are so many charities that are out there, and I think for any type of bereavement, for anything that anyone's journeying through, and I know that obviously you're on the board of let me make sure I get this right.
Oh, pancreatic cancer action.
Pancreatic cancer
or P,
action.
but we'll just call it PCA because that's actually what we
PCA.
all call it. Yeah, PCA.
Love that.
Yeah, I joined after my dad died, so in 2021. I needed to do something because the more and more I found out about pancreatic cancer, I was just like, what the hell it is, and how do so many people not actually even know what their pancreas is? How is there a disease that when you get it, you've got between six, well, not when you get it, when you're diagnosed with it and you're told you have it, you have between 6 and 2 years to live, and that's good. I was like, in 2020, well, now we're in 2024, but this was in 2020 and 2021. I was like, what the hell? What is this? Also, the pancreas is an organ and a gland, but it's involved in insulin production. So black and brown people who are already more susceptible to getting diabetes also will have issues with potentially could be more susceptible to be having issues with pancreatic cancer, because there is a link between problems with insulin production and dealing with insulin and pancreatic cancer. So that was also a thing that, like, I don't know if black and brown people know this. So I was like, I need to find out how I'm going to help. And so I joined. I think I am the youngest person as a trustee for Pancreatic Cancer Action. I am the only person of color. Oh, no, there is another person of color. I am the only female person of color. But I'm just so happy that they listen and that there's space and that I can help them. We've just done an amazing, amazing November is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
The 21st of November is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day. Yesterday, we unveiled a mural that was painted in Manchester in memory of the one of the members of the Smiths, the band The Smiths, who unfortunately passed away to pancreatic cancer. There's so many famous people who have died from pancreatic cancer. Sven-Goran Eriksson had pancreatic cancer and he died recently. Steve Jobs had pancreatic cancer. And when you get it, you go down pretty quickly. And I don't know if you saw pictures of Steve Jobs when he was unwell, but yeah, got very, very thin. It's because you're in a bit sort of a bad situation. It's very painful disease as well. And the issue is that a lot of the signs and symptoms can get really passed off. So you really have to advocate for yourself, and really know, is this right? Is this usual for me? I was talking to a friend, somebody who's become a friend yesterday, but who is a bowel cancer survivor, and she's, unfortunately, the stuff that with bowel cancer, pancreatic cancer, a lot of these rare cancers that are happening in this region of your body, the signs and symptoms are like, your poos aren't great, you got stomach aches, all this kind of stuff. People have been given like fibrogel and told they've got IBF, IBS, sorry, not IBF, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And no, they have cancer. And so you really need to look, what are the signs and symptoms? Am I seeing changes? Go and tell someone, I don't think this is right. Can I have a test? Like, what have you? But you really have to advocate for yourself, because I don't even think, or not that I don't think, but I think there has been some research that, it's very difficult to diagnose pancreatic cancer, similar to bowel. So only you will know that things are not going right down there. So only you can help yourself, is what I would say. But if you have have any sort of worries or think you don't know what the signs of pancreatic cancer are, go to the Pancreatic Cancer Action website, have a look. It's all got details about signs and symptoms, and try and understand a little bit more about it, because I think it's really important. Early diagnosis is really the only way that you can keep yourself around for longer.
Lou, thank you so much for sharing that. I will put the link in the show notes. And I think that awareness is so crucial, isn't it? Just if we can log that in our mind, these are the symptoms, and then know, okay, I need to go and get this checked out. Because to your point, so much that IBS is just thrown about as a term everywhere, so you just go, oh yeah, I've got IBS,
maybe exactly you've got something else going
always
on.
Worth getting it checked out, isn't it?
Indeedy.
I love that. Well, Lou, I've got one final question for you. This is, if you were to write a note to self, so this is from where you're sitting right now, if you would write that note to yourself in the first festive period where you really felt that grief after you lost your mum, what would you say to yourself?
Sounds like a D. I was going to say things will only get better, but then I realized that was the D Ream song. So I was like, oh, come on, Lou, you could do better than that. But yeah, like, this too shall pass. Like, it will get better, It's a very difficult thing to sort of say, but you will cope. You can do it. You've got to keep moving forward. There will be times where you think you're going backwards. There may be times where you have to go backwards for a little bit to then go forward. But you'll get there. And I think, that's what I'd write. You'll get there. Okay,
so Lou has changed locations because everything's done. Speaking of death, the battery died.
The computer died. The computer died.
Very on brand.
Yeah, I know.
I will say that. So we've got a new beginning in a new place.
Yeah,
indeed.
And my computer also dies on a daily. It really needs a new battery. So anyway.
So we're going to rip the rule book up on continuity, and we've got you a new space for the final question.
Yeah, go for it. Let's go for it.
Is, if anyone wants to connect with you, how can they find out more about you, maybe more about Wildflowers or anything else?
Yes, come on LinkedIn, Lou Nylander, with a little pink flower. Find me. Also, we've got a website, wildflowersldn.com. You can find us there. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way. We're also on Insta. To be honest, any social media platform. I've even got a TikTok the other day. I started doing a silly TikToks for laugh. So yeah, any platform you can find me. Even just Google, I'm sure you'll find me there. There's very few Lou Nylanders in the world that look like me, so you'll be able to find me.
Oh, I love that. And the Wildflowers community is just wonderful. It really is such an inclusive space. I definitely recommend come join the Wildflowers community. You'll see me there. And yeah, Lou, I am so grateful to you as well for just speaking your truth, speaking society's truth as well, speaking to your experience as you've moved through the world, because, you know, I think these, as you shared earlier, these conversations are so important, so we can really, really understand how we can also support others who are going through, whether it's a fresh loss or a loss a few years ago. So I'm so grateful to you for joining me on Death on the Daily today.
Thanks for having me.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside, and we'll never make it, and we'll never break.